How are we doing on our self cleanup after we? Good week? All right. I am so glad because I don't want my coffee taken away from me. And if we don't behave ourselves, that will happen probably. You notice I've got my lightning up there again. And I don't want to bore you with lightning, but my lesson today is centered around lightning, centered around God's power and God's majesty, and how we're foolish if we don't recognize it from all the things of nature. Can we see the next? Can you blow that up, Timothy? I don't know if you can see that well enough to see that scar right down the middle of that tree. About 100 feet of that tree was exploded like it had a bomb under the bark. I was sitting in my trailer, looking out my little window at my kingdom, and between me and the bathroom, there's a white wall that has a batten board, and the boards are about that wide, and a lightning shaft came down between me and the building as wide as one of those boards. It looked like it was 8 to 10 inches wide. And on the other side of the building, this tree got just exploded with lightning. Go back to that other one if you would, Tim, the one just before that. This is a picture that was taken just a few days before, a week or so before, by one of our members that's now in Colorado, but he took this picture intending to just take a picture of the lake. And he captured this lightning, but you don't see the evidence of what happens with that picture, but you sure can when you walk around that tree and see the shrapnel from the bark of that thing that just exploded off of there and went 60 to 100 feet beyond where the tree was. That's power. That's the power of God. That's the power. If Elon Musk could just harness that for us, we wouldn't have to worry about power. Today's lesson has to do with why God had to give up the form of creator and come to take the form of a human being to live life like we live it and live it perfectly. Because the word idolatry means I see, I serve. Humankind has had a problem from the very beginning worshiping a God we can't see. So we wind up creating all sorts of idiocies that we make into gods. The Egyptians worship a beetle that any Egyptian child with a pair of sandals can step on that scarab beetle and squish it. And yet they worship that as a god. The Israelites should have done what God told them to do, and that is eliminate all of the people from the land. There was a reason. God wasn't just being cruel when he said, go in and kill men, women, and children. Because the men and women were evil beyond repair. And if you think about it, and if you're able to see in a way that is not like the world looks at things, a child who is already ruined, already contaminated to a point where they will probably never understand the truth of God, that child, if that child is taken from this world, they go back to the hand of God. What a merciful thing if we understand the principle that God was dealing with there. But we don't tend to look at things that can't be seen. We look at things that can be seen. And thus we can't worship a God that we can't see or touch unless we learn. Unless we learn from things like lightning. Unless we learn from lessons that we find in the Bible that have to do with how people contaminated themselves with gods which were no gods. Devin, would you read for us in 1 Kings chapter 18?
Then Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now let them give us 2 oxen, and let them choose 1 ox for themselves, and cut it up, and place it on the wood, and put it under fire, and put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other ox, and lay it on the wood, and I will not put fire under it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people said, that is a good idea. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 ox for yourselves, and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. Then they took the ox, which was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal, from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they leapt about the altar which they made. It came about at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, call out with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he is occupied or gone aside, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and needs to be awakened. So they cried with a loud voice and cut themselves, according to their custom, with swords and lances, until the blood gushed out of them, on them. When midday was past, they raved until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice. No one answered, and no one paid attention.
This has been going on for centuries. Centuries God has put up with this, with humanity. Not recognizing the Creator as the Creator, but mankind making for themselves images that they fall down before and worship as though it's a God, or animals, or crawling creatures that we set up as a God when we have the power and the control over them, and yet we pray to them to save us. Quentin, would you read 1 Kings 18, 30 through 35?
Then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. So with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He made a trench around the altar, large enough to hold 2 measures of seed. Then he arranged the wood and cut the oxen in pieces and laid it on the wood. He said, fill 4 pitchers with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. The water flowed around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water.
Might be good to mention who these prophets of Baal are. Baal simply means Lord. It's the word that the Canaanites use for their supreme Lord, their God. Baal was supposed to be a deity of the weather, lightning, controlled the lightning. He's the one that they would pray to give them rain for their crops. The Sidonian witch, well, I call her a witch, Jezebel, the wife of Ahab, the king of Israel, was a firm follower of Baal and Asherah. She was so adamant, she put her offspring everywhere to control God's people. She had her daughters married to the kings of Judah. 3 different generations. The after effects of her wickedness destroyed the kingdom of Judah as well. Now, when you think about their God being the God of lightning and the God of weather, the God of rain, the God that they prayed to water their crops, And Elijah goes to Ahab and tells Ahab, the king of Israel, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. It won't rain for 3 years and 6 months. And it didn't. And Ahab searched all over for water that he could use to feed his own animals, regardless of the people didn't matter. He was caring for his own. So any water that was available, Ahab absconded with it. 3 years and 6 months, no rain. And then we have this story, this account. I hate to use the word story. It sounds like it might be fiction. This is not fiction. This is the account of Elijah, the prophet, facing a king and a queen that were so bound up in idolatry. I see, I serve. Better yet, I make, I see, I serve. Which makes it even worse that we have the control over something and then we turn and pray to it as though it can help us. Baal, this god of the weather, is what is being tested here. So, Elijah now is faced with 450 prophets of Baal. They've already had their chance. They called upon their God, the God of weather, the God of lightning, the God of rain, to bring down fire and consume this sacrifice. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's taken a nap. Maybe he's out of town. Holler louder. He just ridiculed them because they were ridiculous. And in the process, he is setting the stage for God to show who God is. So Wesley, would you read 1 Kings 18, 36 through 40?
At the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. And the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. Then Elijah said to them, Seize the prophets of Baal, and do not let one of them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Baal, continue.
Think about this for a minute. Elijah, one man, it doesn't say anybody else is involved with this. They took them down there, and Elijah slew 450 men. He had to be worn out by the end of this day, just killing false prophets, killing people who were leading people away from the Almighty, the Creator, talking people into believing in something that was utter nonsense. And everybody should recognize that a stone that you can put your hands on is not your God. Baal was supposed to be this supreme God of weather, lightning, and a symbol of his power. Rain for crops was his specialty. And 3.5 years went by with no rain. Now it's time, after all these prophets have been killed and all of the sacrifice that God had wanted has been taken care of. You know, it's interesting. All that water that Elijah poured on that, and the fire came out of heaven, and it consumed the sacrifice. It licked up the water, licked up or dissolved the stone. I don't know how that happened, but this was something that was something to see. You talk about I see, I serve. Here's a reason to serve God, because they could actually see it. Now think about this for a minute. The reason Jesus was born is so that we could see, so that we had a visual of what God was like. In John 1:18, it says, no man has ever seen God at any time. But the only person of deity to ever be born, he has explained God. We could see God through the life and the attitude and the servitude of Jesus. Wesley, would you read?
Now Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of the roar of a heavy shower." So Ahab went up to eat and drink. But Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he crouched down on the earth and put his face between his knees. He said to his servant, "Go up now, look toward the sea." So he went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." And he said, "Go back 7 times."
Hang on there. Let me leave this for just a minute and go to a picture that I forgot to give to Timothy. That's Mount Carmel. That's where all this took place. And in my mind, I can see Elijah and his servant up there somewhere toward that pinnacle. And Elijah bows down. He bows down toward the sea and he puts his face between his knees and he's praying. He tells his servant, "Go see what you see out over the sea." The servant comes back, "Nothing. I don't see anything." And he continues doing that 7 times, it says. Now, those of you who are interested in numbers, just tuck that away in your mind. Because we have here one of those uses of the number 7 that was kind of helpful when you start looking at the bigger picture of how these numbers are used. But let's go back now to our reading. Wait a minute, where were we? Okay. It came about, so read that, would you?
It came about at the 7th time that he said, "Behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea." And he said, "Go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, so that the heavy shower does not stop you." In a little while the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy shower. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Then the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to Jezreel.
I always wondered why they use that term. He girded up his loins and ran. I think I understand it, because if you're wearing something long and getting in the way, you're going to have to strap it up and get it out of the way of your legs to get moving. Now we go to a passage that helps us to see a transition here. I say, okay, you who claim to be gods, any God that makes that claim, now you got your day in court. Here's your day to prove your point. So Weston, will you read Isaiah 41 for me? 21 through 24.
Present your case, the Lord says. Bring forward your strong arguments, the King of Jacob says. Let them bring forth and declare to us what is going to take place. As for the former events, declare what they were, that we may consider them and know their outcome, or announce to us what is coming. Declare the things that are going to come afterward, that we may know that you are gods, indeed do good or evil, that we may anxiously look about us and fear together. Behold, you are of no account.
Let's back up and look at that a little bit at a time. Present your case. Lord's given you a day in court here. Go ahead. Present your evidence. Bring forward your strong arguments. The King of Jacob says. Who's that? The king of Jacob. Who should have been their king from the outset of their becoming a people? Should have been God. That's why when the people came to Samuel at Ramah in chapter 8 and verse 4 of 1 Samuel and said, give us a king to judge us like everybody else. They had a king. Samuel got all bent out of shape because he was insulted that they didn't want him to be judge. But the Lord said, they haven't rejected you. They've rejected me from being king over them. Here's the king of Jacob speaking out now at long last. Let them bring forth and declare to us what is going to take place. Can they tell the future? Can you tell the future? As for the former events, declare what they were. You know, these people weren't even able to see what has happened if it didn't happen before their very eyes. And very likely they've forgotten those. We're human. We have so many shortcomings. We can't declare to be God, and we can't make a God. We have a God. He says that we may consider them and know their outcome. Tell us what has happened or what is going to happen so that we can watch and we can tell whether you're God or not. Or announce to us what is coming. Declare the things that are going to come afterward. None of God's prophecies have failed. You know, Moses was told, the way you tell a prophet, if what he says doesn't happen, don't listen to him. He's not a prophet of God. If what he says does happen, listen to him because he is from God. Oh, that we may know that you are God's. Indeed, do good or evil. Do something so that we can look. And we're anxiously to look about us and to fear altogether. But you know what? You don't matter. You're of no account. That is serious. And your work amounts to nothing. He who chooses you over the real God is an abomination. You know what an abomination is? Ain't never good. I don't know of anything, anywhere in the Bible that was declared an abomination that later became okay. Plan on that when you read the Bible. If it was at any time in the past an abomination to God, stay away from it. It's no good. Had a question from a young lady here just recently about a Ouija board. And I had to do some research on a Ouija board. I didn't know that it went all the way back to the 1850s, that it was at that time a tool of spiritists that were calling up the dead. Something that is so strictly forbidden in the Old Testament and all the way through. God doesn't want us trying to call up the dead. It's an abomination and will never, ever, ever be good. Devin, would you read, buddy, from Isaiah chapter 42, 8 and 9?
I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven images.
I'm sorry I messed that up for you.
No, it's okay.
I had to put my notes in there because some things I just want to talk about. I am. Such an important statement that only can be said by deity. Only God can say at any time, anywhere, under any circumstances, I am. You know, Shakespeare made a statement famous. To be or not to be, that is the question. There is no question about God. God is, was, and will be. If we could only give credit to that statement. He says, I will not give my glory to another. Think about this. You know, I've in the past, I've shown pictures of a dragonfly and an osprey, a Marine Corps osprey. That mighty bird that delivers our troops to places that they're needed in a heartbeat. This one, everybody gives credit to a pile of geniuses to bring that thing to play. And this, the dragonfly, it just grew itself. It's hard for me to hear that without coming to tears. How stupid can we be to think that this takes a genius or a pile of geniuses and this just happens? Come on now, folks. Don't ever back up to evolutionists that think it just happened. If you can't see genius design in everything that we look at all day long, every day, check your pulse. You might be dead. I will not give my glory to another. I'm not going to relinquish my creative genius to a tree cutter or a blacksmith. And that's basically what was happening. No, nor my praise to graven images. Give the honor that should be mine to a dead stump? Are you kidding me? Can you imagine how aggravating it must be? Do you ever do something for someone and they act like you don't exist? That hurts your feelings. Can you imagine the feelings of God hurt at every person that doesn't recognize that they have been created in the image of this genius? Why should something I make be my God? There's nothing in the world logical about that in any way, shape, or form. Behold, the former things have come to pass. Now I declare new things. Before they spring forth, I declare them to you. He gave the prophets, the false prophets, he gave the gods their chance to do this, and nobody could do it. They couldn't even call fire down out of heaven to consume the sacrifices that were there before them. This has been happening for so many centuries, so many generations. Not me, but Jackson. Would you read this, please?
Bring out the people who are blind, even though they have eyes, and the deaf, even though they have ears. All the nations have gathered together, so that the peoples may be assembled. Who among them can declare this and proclaim to us the former things? Let them present their witnesses, that they may be justified. Or let them hear and say, it is true. You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servants whom I have chosen, so that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God formed, and there will be none after me. I, even I, am the Lord, and there is no Savior besides me. It is I who have declared and saved and proclaimed. And there was no strange God among you. So you are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and I am God. Even from eternity I am He, and there is none who can deliver out of my hand. I act, and who can reverse it?
Boy. I remember other passages about God, such as, who can ward off his hand? I was watching a small child the other day, and Mama trying to control that child. And the child kept going, warding off the hand that was guarding it. But who can ward off God's hand? Who can just push God aside? We may think we have. I act, and who can reverse it? You know, I was looking at that lightning when it struck, and the sound of it almost knocked me out of my chair. It was like a gigantic explosion. And I thought, who on earth can undo what just happened? Because that's in the power of God. I act, who can reverse it? Well, here, you just can't fix stupid. Seth, would you read Isaiah 44, 9 through 20? And this is where we come down to where the rubber meets the road. This is logic, pure truth. Okay.
Those who fashion a graven image are all of them futile, and their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit? Behold, all of his companions will be put to shame, for the craftsmen themselves are mere men. Let them all assemble themselves. Let them stand up. Let them tremble. Let them together be put to shame.
Okay, hang on just a minute here. Timothy, can you throw that little meme up there? This is just the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
One of the most memorable phrases in movie history. To us, not just some of us, but every last one of us at one time or another. We can't handle the truth. When you find yourself in a situation where you're skirting the truth, avoiding the truth, it's because you can't handle the truth. I have been there so many times, it just scares the wadding out of me. That I'm not remembered for my times of not being able to handle the truth. It is an individual thing. It's not a congregational thing. It's not a church-wide thing. It is an individual thing that I, myself, recognize and love the truth. I just finished writing something, and I used my good friend and my eternal brother, Marty, as an example. There was one day, we get ideas in our head, and they dominate our thinking. And for years, I have felt irritation at anyone who would get up and talk about the blood of Jesus being spilt. It wasn't spilt. He offered it. And then Marty, very gently, well, maybe not quite so gently, but I am so thankful for anyone who corrects me on something that I'm just dead wrong on. Because even though I don't like to be wrong, I would rather get right. And if you can do that for me, I love you. Truth matters. God's truth is the only thing that matters. Because it doesn't matter about your truth and this truth and that truth. What matters is the sum of God's word, because that is truth. Amen. Okay, go ahead and read.
The man shapes iron into a cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning it with hammers and working it with his strong arm.
Hang on a second. Let's talk about this as we go. Here you got a man. I love this one because I consider myself a third generation blacksmith. I would love to just spend the rest of my days just pounding iron. There are limitations to what a blacksmith can do. You know, a blacksmith is not the genius creator. He does just plain old simple stuff. He pounds iron. Go ahead.
Would you scroll?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
He also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends the measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes and outlines it with compass, and makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of man, so that it may sit in a house. Surely he cuts cedar for himself, and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself. Among the trees of the forest he plants a fir, and the rain makes it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn, so he takes one of them and warms himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes a graven image and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this half he eats meat, and as he roasts a roast and is satisfied. And he also warms himself and says, "Aha, I am warm, I have seen the fire." But the rest of it he makes into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worships. He also prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." Though they do not know, nor do they understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot comprehend. No one recalls, nor is there knowledge or understanding to say, "I have burned half of it in the fire, and also have baked bread over its coals. I roast meat and eat it. Then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood." He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver himself, nor say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand?"
Is there not a lie in my right hand? All of the evidence telling these people and us, don't say those people, because every one of us have something that we hold in our right hand that can lead us, that can become our deity, that we worship and serve. Jesus went into the world from the house of Joseph and Mary. God sent forth his son, born of a woman, to explain God to us, to show us that a human being could obey if we have the right attitude. If your attitude's not right, if you serve what you see, and you know that you need to change,